Today we're going to review adjustments on the Nulong DS9C sewing head. Here we have one on the workbench and we'll just go through the adjustments here. This right here is the stitch length. So if we take that down this way or to the back of the machine, that'll increase the stitch length, and we bring it up this way, it'll decrease the length of the stitch length. Other adjustments here, probably the one of the most common adjustments is the distance between the looper, the top of the looper, and the center of the needle. Now that's shown in the book what that dimension is. We made a small tool here. This is 6mm 1/4 inch thick, and what you'll see is that if this represents the looper, from the top tip of the looper to the edge of the needle is that dimension right there. So instead of trying to fit the tool in, removing the throat plate and taking it all apart to fit the tool in, we slide this into place, and then what you would do is you loosen these two cap screws here. That allows the looper to move up and down. So you would bring the looper, you would rotate the machine to bring the looper to the top of the stroke, loosen these two, and particularly if the machine is sitting up vertically, you can just drop the looper down, just sit this down in on top of the needle, sit the looper on top, and then gently tighten up these screws, and that will set that dimension. We might be able to see it underneath here. It's a little bit awkward, but again, if we sit this gauge here between the needle and the looper, that is the distance that we want there. In the book, it shows this tie rod here is quite a tight dimension. I find that is not a crucial dimension. We seldom adjust that. Just leave that where it is, and like I said, loosen it here and use that to set the relation between the looper and the needle. Now, for setting the location left and right, or the looper relative to the needle, is this one right down here. So what we want to do is when the looper comes down, we want it just to clear the needle on both sides. So this one, if we loosen this, we can set how close the looper is to the needle and lock it up. Now, another adjustment here that's seldom seen is this right here. If we loosen these two set screws and rotate this collar one way or the other, that determines the pitch, the stroke of the looper. So, we want it to just clear the needle on either side. We don't want too much stroke, but that is that adjustment there. So if you find, for example, that the looper is hitting the needle on both sides, then you need to increase the stroke. You would need to adjust this. Usually just 10 or 20 degrees, just moving it over, say 1/4 inch one way or the other, will make a fair bit of difference on that. Now, if you happen to be working down in this area, just one footnote here, we see on this sort of counterweight piece here, there's two set screws, and there's one flat on the shaft, on this shaft down in here, and that flat lines up with the rear set screw. Okay, so the one that is 180 degrees from the counterweight. So not this screw here, but the one actually on the back here. So we have stitch length, we have looper adjustment with the needle. Now, if we find it's seldom we see this, but if the needle is not the right distance up and down, which is an uncommon problem, but if it does happen, then we have to drop the bottom plate on this one, and we move, it's called the needle bar, move the needle bar in and out. Okay, and on this machine we have to move the needle bar in and out to get that adjustment. One other adjustment here that is sometimes overlooked is the position of the feed dog. So it shows it in the book, although it's not totally clear. What we want there is with the feed dog stroked all the way to the left. There's supposed to be a 1.5 thou gap, and I'll point this out here if I can get in there. 1.5 thou gap between the back of the feed dog and the throat plate. So right in here, so what we do is we get a I get, it's marked in the book 1.5 millimeters. I use my 1.5 millimeter Allen key, and it should just slide in on the center set of teeth, okay, with the feed dog all the way to the left. To adjust that, we loosen these right here. So it's fairly easy. If you rotate it so that the feed dog is all the way to the left, if that gap is not correct, then just loosen these two, put your feeler gauge in, push the feed dog up against it, tighten them up, and then you're all set. Down underneath here, just while we're looking at it, very common problem. If these come loose, if these feed dog tightening screws here come loose, then what can happen is it slots out, it opens up this casting, and then the feed dog can tilt back and forth, and then it's very, very difficult to ever keep them tight after that. So if you have a feed dog and it will wobble inside there, then the best thing is just to change out this complete assembly right here, and otherwise you'll be always fighting with the feed dogs trying to keep them tight. Okay, so two different front feed dog, rear feed dog here. Also, one other quick setup detail, the front feed dog should be set up just slightly lower than the rear feed dog. So normally you'd have the pressure foot off, put a flat edge across the top, and the front one should be slightly lower. Now this is not always, to actually do that, you can't just tighten or loosen this and position it here. You have to take the throat plate off and the feed dog off, and actually underneath the feed dog there's a tiny 3 millimeter jacking screw underneath there. So you have to take all this apart. There's a little tiny jacking screw in this black casting piece right up here. Take it all apart, thread that in or out, and then put it all back together. And we like to use a little bit of blue Loctite on those little screws to hold them into place because they are crucial. And I think that's about it. You see, we do have the cutter out of this one. You'll notice it's missing a few parts. One other quick note here. This is the chaining pressure foot here. It is crucial that is always it always is contacting the feed dog perfectly. And actually, you'll notice when we lift up on the handle here, it should just raise first, and then the other one should. Okay, so if it's set up properly, that raises up first, and then the large pressure foot. That if you're having chaining problems or it won't chain out without a bag, just make sure that chaining foot is operating properly. And that's it for today.